It was the kind of crisp autumn morning that invites nostalgia. The leaves had just begun to turn in Portland, Oregon, in the fall of 2001, and Kevin Mannis found himself in a quiet residential neighborhood, scanning the contents of an estate sale. He had been attending these auctions for years, combing through the remnants of lives left behind, searching for antiques to stock his small furniture store. The house belonged to a woman named Havila, a recently deceased Holocaust survivor. Her family had hired an auctioneer to handle the sale. The assortment of items ranged from mundane kitchenware to delicate jewelry and religious artifacts. Mannis moved slowly through the rooms, running his fingers over surfaces, inspecting craftsmanship, always on the lookout for something unusual. That's when he saw it. Sitting unassumingly on a table of odds and ends was a small wooden cabinet, no larger than a shoebox. It was a wine cabinet, made of a dark, polished wood with brass fittings and a slightly warped door. On closer inspection, faint Hebrew letters could be seen etched on the inside of the cabinet. The woodwork was beautiful, though worn with age. Mannis was intrigued. There was something almost dignified about the little box, as if it had witnessed more than it should have. He asked the auctioneer about it. The man simply shrugged and said it had been kept in Havila's sewing room for decades. Mannis placed a bid, winning the cabinet for a modest sum. He planned to clean it up, perhaps refinish the wood, and sell it as an interesting conversation piece in his shop. There was no indication, not then, that the box would soon take on a life of its own. He carried it to his car, resting it on the passenger seat. As he drove back to his store, he couldn't help but feel a strange heaviness in the air, though he dismissed it as nothing more than the weight of imagination. It was just a box, after all. At least, that's what he thought. After returning to his store, Mannis began the usual process of cataloging his new find. As he polished the box and examined its hinges, he noticed something odd. Inside were several small items, as if it had been used as a kind of personal shrine. Among them were 2 pennies from the 1920s, a small lock of blonde hair bound with string, a lock of dark hair, a tiny granite statue engraved with the word Shalom, a dried rosebud, and a golden goblet. Each item was carefully placed, clearly intentional, not the usual junk that collects in drawers over the years. It felt more ritualistic than random. Curious, Mannis reached out to Havila's granddaughter, who had been present at the auction. He wanted to know more about the woman and the strange little box she'd left behind. The granddaughter was hesitant at first, but after some coaxing, she shared what she knew. Her grandmother had brought the box with her when she fled Poland after the Holocaust. It had been in her possession ever since. The family always believed it was a Dybbuk box, though none of them really understood what that meant. Havila herself, according to the granddaughter, was adamant that it was never to be opened. She would become visibly upset whenever anyone touched it. When asked what was inside, she refused to say, insisting only that it was something that should not be disturbed. To Mannis, this sounded more like superstition than anything else. But the story fascinated him. He decided to include it on a note that he would keep with the box, documenting its origin and supposed purpose. The note read, in part, "This wine cabinet is said to be a Dybbuk box brought from Poland by a Holocaust survivor. It contains items of personal significance and is believed to house a restless spirit. The previous owner instructed that it should never be opened." Mannis wasn't sure he believed in spirits or curses, but he appreciated a good story, especially one that could help sell an antique. He placed the box in his shop's front window next to its note and went about his day. But it didn't take long before he began to wonder if Havila's warning had been more than just superstition. That very night, Mannis began to notice strange things happening. He stayed late in the shop, taking inventory. The store was quiet, as always, but the air felt different, heavy, almost oppressive. At one point, while in the back room, he heard what sounded like glass shattering out front. Rushing to the showroom, he found nothing broken, yet the sound had been unmistakable. Over the next few days, other oddities began piling up. Lights flickered, even though the wiring was sound. A faint smell of jasmine, and then, inexplicably, cat urine would fill the room at random intervals. At night, Mannis started having vivid, disturbing dreams. In them, an old woman with sunken eyes would scream at him in a language he couldn't understand. He would wake up drenched in sweat, his heart racing. Even customers noticed something was off. One woman browsing the shop stopped abruptly near the box and muttered, "It feels wrong here," before quickly leaving. But the most unsettling moment came one evening when Manus was closing up. He was turning off the lights when he heard a whisper, faint but clear, calling his name. He froze. The store was empty. The whisper came again, a little louder this time. "Kevin," he turned, scanning the shadows, but no one was there. By now, his curiosity had shifted to unease. He began researching the Dybbuk legend more seriously, trying to understand what he had brought into his life. The more he read, the more uneasy he became. What if the box really was more than just an old cabinet? Long before Kevin Manus ever laid eyes on the little wooden cabinet, the word Dybbuk already carried a weight of fear and superstition. In Jewish mysticism, a Dybbuk is believed to be the wandering soul of a deceased person, dislodged from its proper resting place and clinging to the living. The word itself comes from the Hebrew dak, meaning to cling or to adhere. In the Jewish communities of Eastern Europe, stories of Dybbukim were part of the cultural fabric. These spirits were thought to enter the bodies of the living, usually as a form of punishment or unfinished business. A Dybbuk could torment its host with physical illness, strange voices, or erratic behavior. Victims of possession often sought out a rabbi, trained in exorcisms, to rid them of the spirit. The ritual to banish a Dybbuk was elaborate. It involved prayer, the blowing of the shofar, and sometimes the recitation of sacred names meant to compel the spirit to leave. The exorcism would usually take place in a synagogue, with a minyan, a quorum of 10 men, present to witness and lend spiritual support. But as pervasive as these stories were, nowhere in centuries of Jewish teaching was there mention of containing a Dybbuk in a box. The earliest written accounts of Dybbukim, dating back to the 16th and 17th centuries, describe possession, not entrapment. In traditional belief, the Dybbuk's power lay precisely in its ability to invade the human body, not to linger inside an inanimate object. Some scholars argue that the idea of a Dybbuk box is a modern invention, a fusion of authentic Jewish folklore with a broader Western fascination with cursed objects. In Yiddish theater, particularly Ansky's 1920 play The Dybbuk, the concept of possession was dramatized and popularized, but even there, no box or container played a role. Still, the idea of a cursed or haunted object is hardly unique to Jewish culture. From ancient Egyptian amulets to Victorian mourning jewelry, humans have long imbued objects with spiritual significance and fear. For Kevin Manus, however, what mattered most was what the woman's family told him, that their grandmother had treated the box as if it contained something terrible and that it should never, under any circumstances, be opened. Whether that belief came from authentic religious tradition or her own personal trauma was something Manus could only speculate about. The story, however, was powerful, and stories, as Manus was already beginning to learn, have a way of taking on lives of their own. By 2003, the box was no longer just an intriguing antique to Kevin Manus. The strange events continued, wearing on his nerves and leaving him sleepless. Lights in his home flickered without reason. His mother suffered a sudden stroke after he gave her the box as a gift. Every time he tried to part with it, by selling it or even leaving it outside, it found its way back to him, one way or another. Finally, Manus decided to get rid of it in a way that suited the story it carried. He posted it for auction on eBay, writing one of the most infamous listings in the platform's history. The description was long and detailed. Manus outlined the estate sale, the Holocaust survivor's warning, the strange items inside the box, and the series of misfortunes he'd experienced since bringing it home. He wrote about the whispers in the dark, the nightmares, the faint smells of jasmine and ammonia, and the growing sense of dread. This is a very serious listing, he cautioned. If you do not fully understand what you are bidding on, or you're not able to exercise appropriate caution, please do not bid. The listing went viral. At a time when creepypasta and online urban legends were still in their infancy, the Dybbuk Box struck a chord with internet audiences. Readers debated whether the story was genuine or just a clever piece of fiction, but either way, they couldn't look away. The winning bidder was a Missouri college student named Iosif Nitsk, who purchased the box for $140. Within weeks, Nitsk claimed to experience similar misfortunes: hair falling out, persistent nightmares, and an inexplicable sense of unease. He soon passed it on to another owner, and then another. Each transfer of ownership only deepened the box's dark legend and expanded its reach. After Nitsk came a string of new owners, each with their own unsettling stories. One man reportedly fell into a deep depression. Another claimed the box caused his houseplants to wither overnight and his electronics to fail without explanation. Yet another reported welts and bruises appearing on his arms, as though he'd been gripped in his sleep. In 2004, the box found its way to Jason Haxton, the director of a medical museum in Missouri. Haxton had followed the box's story online and was fascinated by its lore. Once it arrived in his possession, he said, the box unleashed a fresh wave of torment. He developed strange respiratory problems, welts on his skin, and recurring nightmares of a demonic woman. Unlike previous owners, however, Haxton tried to approach the problem methodically. He sought advice from rabbis and spiritual advisors, some of whom suggested performing a binding ritual to neutralize the box's power. He claims to have successfully sealed whatever presence resided within and then hid the box away in a secret location. For years, the Dybbuk Box faded from public attention. Haxton's story added to its growing mythology and suggested that even if the box's power could not be destroyed, it could at least be contained. But the story wasn't over yet. In the age of Hollywood and reality television, a legend like this was too potent to stay buried for long. By the early 2010s, the Dybbuk Box's legend had circulated widely online, inspiring countless blog posts and even academic discussions about folklore in the digital age. But it was Hollywood that brought the story to its widest audience yet. In 2012, producer Sam Raimi released The Possession, a supernatural horror film loosely based on the Dybbuk Box. The movie follows a family plagued by an ancient Jewish spirit contained in a small, ornate box. Though the plot veered far from Kevin Maniss's original account, it retained key elements: the Holocaust survivor, the strange items inside, and the box's insidious influence on those who opened it. The movie grossed nearly $80 million worldwide and introduced millions of viewers to the term Dybbuk for the first time. Its marketing leaned heavily on the claim that the film was based on a true story, adding to the mystique of the real-life box. Hollywood's portrayal blurred the lines between fact and fiction, a familiar pattern in the history of haunted objects. Some viewers walked away believing the Dybbuk Box was a centuries-old part of Jewish tradition, while others dismissed the story entirely as just another promotional gimmick. Yet the movie also reignited interest in the box itself. Paranormal enthusiasts began tracking its whereabouts. Bloggers revisited Kevin Maniss's eBay listing, and amateur ghost hunters speculated on its powers. In the years following the film's release, demand for information, and even replicas of Dybbuk Boxes surged online. The Hollywood treatment transformed the Dybbuk Box from a niche internet legend into a pop culture phenomenon. But with that spotlight came deeper scrutiny and more questions about how much of the story was ever really true. As the Dybbuk Box gained notoriety, skeptics began examining its origins more closely. Jewish scholars were among the first to question its authenticity. According to them, the notion of a Dybbuk being trapped in a box simply didn't fit with Jewish religious or folklore tradition. Gershon Winkler, an Orthodox rabbi and expert in Jewish mysticism, publicly stated that the story made no sense within the context of Jewish belief. Dybbukim, he explained, were thought to possess living people, not objects, and certainly not to be sealed inside a container. Other researchers dug into Kevin Maniss's background and found even more reason to doubt. In interviews years later, Maniss admitted that his original eBay description was at least partly embellished, calling it a creative writing experiment. He even confessed to planting the strange items inside the box himself, to give the story a more authentic feel. Paranormal investigator and author Kenny Biddle analyzed the claims and concluded that the Dybbuk Box was a carefully constructed hoax. The box itself, he discovered, was not even a wine cabinet at all, but a small minibar manufactured in New York around the 1950s, decades after the Holocaust. These revelations didn't stop people from believing in the box's power, but they did highlight how easily folklore can be shaped, and how even a simple narrative can evolve into a full-blown legend. For many, the Dybbuk Box became less about whether it was truly haunted and more about what it represented, the human need to believe in something beyond ourselves. And yet, despite the mounting evidence against its authenticity, the box continued to inspire fear and fascination. Its next chapter would take it to one of the most famous paranormal museums in the world. Today, the Dybbuk Box sits behind glass at Zach Bagans' Haunted Museum in Las Vegas. Bagans, host of the television series Ghost Adventures, acquired the box from Jason Haxton and quickly made it a centerpiece of his collection. Visitors to the museum are warned not to touch the display and to proceed at their own risk. Bagans claims the box remains dangerous and attributes several unexplained events, fainting spells, sudden illness, even a guest's death, to its presence. Some visitors report feeling lightheaded, overwhelmed, or chilled when they stand near the glass case. Bagans himself has said he experienced disturbing dreams and visions after bringing the box into his museum. He staged a highly publicized event where musician Post Malone reportedly touched the box, after which Malone was involved in a car accident and an emergency plane landing, events some attributed to the box's curse. To date, no scientific evidence has confirmed that the Dybbuk Box causes harm or harbors any supernatural power. Its effect on visitors seems tied more to suggestion and the human tendency to see patterns in coincidence. And yet, the display remains one of the museum's most popular attractions, drawing thousands each year. Whether or not they believe in the box's power, visitors seem unable to resist confronting the unsettling story it tells. For better or worse, the Dybbuk Box has become a modern relic, not just of Jewish folklore, but of our own enduring fascination with the unknown. The Dybbuk Box sits at a curious crossroads, somewhere between history and myth, skepticism and belief. What began as an unassuming wine cabinet in a Portland estate sale became, through story and suggestion, one of the most infamous haunted objects of our time. It is easy to see why the box captivates. Its tale weaves together elements that resonate deeply. The tragedy of the Holocaust, the richness of Jewish mysticism, and the universal fear of the unknown. In a way, the box reflects something fundamental about human nature, our desire to find meaning in objects, to assign stories to the things we touch and keep. Skeptics have shown that the Dybbuk Box, as we know it, has no basis in traditional Jewish teaching. The box itself is not a centuries-old relic, but a mid-20th century minibar. The strange items inside were placed there by Kevin Mannis, whose later admissions suggest the story may have begun as a creative experiment. By all accounts, there is no historical precedent for a Dybbuk being trapped in a container. And yet, people continue to feel uneasy around it. Visitors to the museum report chills, headaches, and even fear. Perhaps these reactions have nothing to do with the supernatural and everything to do with expectation, the mind's ability to manifest what it believes to be true. Psychologists call it the nocebo effect, the power of belief to make us feel harmed. But even stripped of its supposed powers, the box remains an enduring artifact of modern folklore. Like the haunted dolls, cursed mirrors, and ill-fated jewelry that came before it, the Dybbuk Box reminds us how thin the line is between what is real and what we choose to believe. In the end, whether the box is truly haunted may matter less than the fact that its story endures. Because stories, once told, take on lives of their own. They linger, clinging to us, just like the Dybbuk of legend. And perhaps that is the greatest mystery of all, how a story can haunt us long after the lights come back on. What do you think of today's story? What dark chapter should we open next? Let us know in the comments. And if you enjoyed this journey, don't forget to like and subscribe. Close the book if you can. This is Black Chapter.